I just got to play on Battlefield 6's giant maps and record the footage for you guys to see. There's Mirak Valley, which is a pretty large, kind of flattish map with a massive construction building in the center that provides some decent infantry firefights and oversight. And then of course there's Operation Firestorm, the remake, which is, well, it's smaller than the previous map, which definitely changes up the pacing. However, some of the real highlights of just getting to play the game again were being able to use all the new gadgets and weapons that I think we're going to see at launch. The sledgehammer, which replaces your melee weapon, is super cool, and it's basically your universal key that can be used to open like everything. It's definitely changed my approach to Firestorm building entrances. The deployable ladder was also in the game, and it's a ladder, which might be more useful on maps that don't already have ladders everywhere. The EOD bot is legitimately good at destroying tanks. I got to use the new mortar system, and oh yeah, I got to play with what I believe are all the weapons for the launch candidate of the game, and there's some bangers in there. Now I want to give EA a big shout out for inviting me to participate in this closed play session where they allowed me to capture footage and release it to you guys. So first things first, let's talk about DICE's big maps that'll save us from the CQB fest that was the beta. Mirak Valley definitely delivers the long-range gameplay. Tank battles at range, helicopter strafing runs, extremely talented piloting flybys. This is a solid map. Perhaps, and again this is kind of a Battlefield 6 thing, but perhaps not the best looking map that I've ever seen. The visuals are a little bit basic, but the layout and gameplay is a lot of fun. The massive construction site in the center really is an infantry playground, and I almost got killed by a huge destruction event where a huge crane fell on the structure in the middle, and it actually forced me to jump off the side of the building. Now around the exterior of the map there's capture points that offer a nice mixture of vehicle and infantry opportunities. Armor is definitely going to get a bit more work done here than it will in the center of the map, but infantry still have enough useful cover to really deter armor if they want to. There's some anti-air emplacements scattered around the map in key locations, and pilots are going to need to be really careful here as there isn't a lot of cover for them to use. Mirak Valley is probably going to show just how well ground and air balance actually is. Ground seems to have a lot of tools to shoot them down. I was playing a tank and taking out plenty of helicopters just fine. Granted, those helicopters seem to be largely piloted by AI, but nonetheless it didn't seem too difficult. Now, unfortunately, it was hard to judge some of the pacing of these maps because there was a lot of bots in the servers that I was playing on. The play sessions were broken into multiple groups, and I think the North American group just had less people in it, so we didn't have full servers to test, and by the end of the session I was just fighting waves and waves of bots, so it became really hard to judge some of the gameplay balance. So just keep that in mind as I give my feedback about the different maps. When it comes to Operation Firestorm, the visuals and the vibes are certainly here. The map looks cool and it evokes a lot of that classic BF3 and BF4 feels. However, aside from some of the central conflict areas, the map layout feels quite different, much smaller and a bit more claustrophobic. The sniper hill locations are basically gone, and the distance to some of the outskirt objectives feels way smaller. And the thing that kind of annoys me a little bit about this is that if DICE wanted to do a much smaller, more controlled map layout, then they should have just made a different map or remastered a different map instead of taking Firestorm and shrinking it way down. I will agree that the original Operation Firestorm had a lot of design issues, especially when it comes to hilltop sniping and easy to camp bases, but also the scale of the map really led to this sort of almost adventurous play sessions, where the new version of Firestorm, I feel like there are very few moments where I was caught out in the open trying to figure out the best way to cross an exposed street. The cover in this new version is very well thought out and convenient, which also just changes up the feeling of the map in a pretty big way. Now, all that said, I actually do like the map and I think it plays well. As its own thing though, not as an homage to the original Firestorm. The large warehouse buildings provide some really fun firefight opportunities. The sledgehammer really makes it fun to bash into these places and create my own points of entry. The large refinery structure still has that fun chaotic layout with sniping from way up high, and even though the map is smaller overall, there's definitely some fun medium range tank battles to be had. And if I were looking at the map design objectively, it probably is much better balanced than the original, and it has much better flow and pacing than the original, I would imagine. But it might also lose a bit of its charm because of the pretty big changes that they've made. Now, Firestorm also let me test some gadget gameplay a bit more, like with EOD bots. These guys are back, and frankly, they are a nuisance to armor. Get one of these under a tank and they might be dead before they even realize what's hitting them. The deployable ladder is neat, though it feels like these two large open maps were not a good showcase for this gadget. I would imagine it's going to be far more useful on maps that have a lot of verticality and buildings with second-story windows. Now, in this build of the game, the Assault has been updated with the Spawn Beacon gadget, taken from the Recon class. While playing with it, it was obviously very good, allowing for nice aggressive flanks and spawn points for the squad. When I switched back to the Recon class and looked through their gadget selection, it did feel a bit on the weaker side. They have drones again that can be used for spotting and a bunch of other spotting, team-oriented tools, but they definitely felt lacking in terms of just gadget variety. Now, cycling through all the weapons, there is an impressive selection with many of my favorites. The Chris Vector is back and it's a very powerful SMG, though it doesn't come with a drum mag this time around, probably for the better. I was enjoying the L85 and the Scar assault rifles. They're nice medium to long range alternatives. There's many new optics and new attachments to play around with, and there seems to be a very deliberate trade-off between weapon magazine and damage capacity versus actual recoil control and accuracy, which I like. It means that you'll be able to dial things in more specifically to your playstyle and how you like to control the recoil of a weapon, or how much hipfire you want versus ADS gameplay, and all of that. It seems like there's going to be a ton of options here to just sort of kit build for quite a while. Now, there were simply just too many guns to actually play through all of them and give you any sort of sense of recommendations across the board. There weren't, however, very many sidearms to pick from, nor were there very many bolt-action rifles. Again, I don't know if this is the final list for launch, but at least in this build of the game, just not a lot of variety there, though I can easily see DICE expanding these categories after launch. Now, the Engineer has a lot of different lock-on and guided rocket launcher options. I'm looking forward to getting good with the guided rocket launcher once again and maybe shooting some helicopters out of the air, but it made it very easy to hit jeeps and tanks on the ground. Support has a mortar, which, I don't know, felt kind of boring to use. It sort of felt like the classic mortar where you set it up, look at the mini-map and fire, and then just wait to see if you get a kill. It definitely didn't feel as powerful as the Battlefield 1 mortar, and I like that because indirect fire weapons, I think, at best just lead to annoying gameplay, so the less useful they are for getting kills, I think the better. And in my opinion, I think it would be cool if these gadgets had more of an emphasis on just using them tactically to put down more smoke and intel devices, flares in the sky, whatever that would like spot enemies, just that type of gameplay as opposed to just flat out getting kills. Now, I got to play on Conquest, Breakthrough, and a tiny bit of Escalation. Conquest and Breakthrough were fun on both maps, again, keeping in mind that I was playing against a lot of bots. Escalation, which I was really looking forward to, had the least amount of playtime available, so I didn't get a great feel for the mode, but in the one round that I got to play on it, it was neat to see Mirak Valley go from severed capture points down to 6, down to 5, down to 4, and eventually 3 capture points, forcing a lot of that gameplay into a much tighter, more chaotic environment. Basically, the idea is that a match evolves from a larger, more strategic game to a much more focused, brute force gameplay by the end of it, and I think it's got a lot of potential. I just need to play it a bit more. Now, overall, I like the new maps that are coming. I like the new weapons. I like the gadgets. I still have some questions about some of the class balance, and I do think DICE is a little bit afraid about approaching some of the massive scale maps that we've seen in previous games, and it seems like they're trying to shrink them down just a little so they can control the pacing better, which, you know, I can't fault them for wanting to really engineer their gameplay more specifically, but for players looking for something that feels bigger, more expansive, we might not be getting that, at least with the initial batch of maps. And now that you guys have seen some of the gameplay on these new maps and some of the new weapons, I'd love to hear what your reactions are to the gameplay and the visuals, and also maybe some of the new weapons and gadgets. Let me know in the comments. And if you guys want to see just how crazy it is to try and make your own video game, check out my latest devlog for Seabeams, a spaceship action RPG that I've been working on for well over a year now. And I've been really enjoying showing the behind the scenes for the devlogs and what goes into making your own video game. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.